As free people of democratic nations, of people who support freedom, we should also support privacy, because without privacy we will not be able to exercise any of our rights in the future. So the conversation should go into a direction where we normalize privacy and enable it for everyone, because that's a train we clearly missed when we started building out the internet infrastructure we have today. But I also am very optimistic about this, because in recent years we have seen developments that were not, that were unthinkable a couple of years ago, with end-to-end encryption and Nostr as decentralized social media, for example. Bitcoin obviously as unstoppable money that cannot taken away from you. And Ecash is also part of that, because it allows you to build systems, custodial systems that are private, respect your privacy as an individual, and also cannot be censored arbitrarily.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin block height is 832,156, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. Today, that guest is Calle, an open source Bitcoin and Lightning developer who is currently exploring Chaumy and Ecash and started Cashew, an open source Ecash protocol for Bitcoin. You've probably seen a lot of talk about Ecash recently on social media, but if you're like me, you may still have a lot of questions about what it is, how it works, and what it means going forward. So today's episode will answer those exact questions, and probably answer some questions you didn't even know you should ask. We also dig into Nostr, scaling Bitcoin, and even CBDCs using Ecash. You can find all Calle's links in the show notes, as well as links to other Ecash projects built on top of Cashew. I highly recommend you check them out. As always, you can watch the video version of this episode on Rumble, YouTube, or X by searching @WalkerAmerica, or listen on Fountain.fm or wherever you get your podcast by searching for The Bitcoin Podcast. If you listen to The Bitcoin Podcast on Fountain, which I recommend, consider giving this show a boost or creating a clip of something you found interesting. And if you're a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, hit me up on social media or through the website bitcoinpodcast.net. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Calle. Now we are live. Well, again, hello and welcome to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Walker.
And so, we were just talking a little bit before this. Usually I start off with the question to guests, who are you and how did you get here today? But for you, I want to have the question just be, what are you building today? And what is your energy and attention focused on, Calle?
So I'm a Bitcoin developer, and I started building mostly on Lightning, which I still do. So I was involved in several Lightning projects myself. And in the last year, I've explored more and more Chaumy and Ecash, which, I started a project called Cashew, which is an open source Ecash protocol built for Bitcoin. And that's where I spend most of my time these days, building software for Cashew and talking to other developers who are working on their own projects and working out a protocol with them so we can all speak the same language and build software that is interoperable under this umbrella.
Beautiful. And, I think maybe for those who are not familiar or have been too afraid to ask at this point, what exactly Ecash is. The idea has obviously been around since, I believe, the early 80s, right? David Chaum in 82 wrote the first kind of paper about it. But can you maybe give folks just a little bit of a background and a primer on how Ecash came to be and then kind of where it has evolved to at this point? Because some of the early projects were ultimately failures prior to Bitcoin coming on the scene and then that providing a new vehicle for Ecash, let's say?
Mm-hmm. So it depends where we want to start, because this question is fairly deep, right? So, but I'll suggest we'll just start at the beginning, and we can go as deep as you like. So Chaumian eCash, as the name says, was invented by a genius cryptographer called David Chaum. And this was 1982, so this is a precursor to Bitcoin by a long stretch and any kind of payments on the internet and online payments. So David Chaum came up with this idea to build an anonymous payment system back in 82 that allows users who have a bank account, for example, to execute anonymous payments on that bank account, because he foresaw already in 82 that most of our lives will be online at some point, and we will be leaving traces for everything that we do. And he anticipated that already in 82, which is amazing to think about, because the internet was still very far away for consumers. And so in 82, he comes up with this idea called blind signatures, and figures that you can actually make a payment protocol out of this idea. And so for anyone who doesn't know what a blind signature is, the typical example that folks like to give in order to imagine what it's about is a physical one with the carbon paper. And we'll do it here again. So imagine, the idea of blind signatures is that someone can give you a signature on a document that they haven't seen yet, but once you present them the document with the signature, they can verify the signature was indeed from them. So in a physical world, an example might be a contract that you write. For example, that contract may say, this contract is worth 1 Bitcoin. And you put that paper contract into a carbon paper envelope. A carbon paper is where you write on top of it and presses through to the document below. So when you put this original contract, the contract says this is worth 1 Bitcoin, into a carbon paper envelope, and now send it, for example, to a bank. The bank might say, here's a contract in an envelope which I cannot see, but I know that you would like to have a signature on it, so please send me 1 Bitcoin first. And when you've done that, I will sign the contract from the outside and send it back to you. So you would send, for example, 1 Bitcoin to this bank, and the bank then provides a signature onto the envelope and sends you back the envelope. And still closed. It never opened until now. And when you receive it back, you can actually open the envelope and take out the contract, and now you have a signature on a contract that says the bank owes me 1 Bitcoin. And the nice thing about this is that this was a blind signature, so the bank never saw the contract, which means that when you next go, when you take the contract and go now to the bank and say, hey bank, I would like to have my 1 Bitcoin back, please, and here's the contract with the proof that you approved this, then the bank cannot correlate the signature operation that it did before with the redemption operation that you're doing now. And this is what gives eCash the perfect privacy, basically. So obviously this doesn't happen on paper, it happens with cryptography, and you're the only person who can open the envelope because it was encrypted by you, and so on and so forth. But these are the details. The general idea is the same. You could build an eCash system purely out of paper as well. So that is the rough idea of how David Chaum envisioned eCash to work already in 82, but obviously not with Bitcoin because it wasn't around, but on the banking system. So replace everything that I said with just dollars. And the idea was phenomenal and very forward-thinking, and it caused a lot of excitement already in the late 80s and in the beginning of the 90s, and big banks like Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse and big players like MasterCard and Microsoft. And they were all very, very excited about this idea and wanted to build a future in which we can transact online with eCash, denominated in US dollars, to buy stuff online and so on and so forth. However, unfortunately, this beautiful future that we could have had never came to reality because of several operational problems that the company that was building on this technology called DigiCash made some mistakes here and there. You can research it yourself if you're interested why this business failed, but ultimately there was a business failure of this grandiose idea. However, in hindsight, we can also see that the idea depended on the cooperation with the financial system. So banks must have been on board in order to really build a system that makes sense, right? You need a bank to deposit the US dollars to and then get the Ecash and so on and so forth. So that is also a very big friction point in the development of the story. Well, then Ecash basically died. So this went nowhere except for some experiments that have been done and no significant or meaningful adoption of this technology. And then we waited altogether for around another 20 years and Bitcoin came about. So Bitcoin and Satoshi Nakamoto also directly references Chaumian Ecash multiple times, and everyone was thinking about Chaumian Ecash and how to improve that during those times, especially the cypherpunks. Satoshi then found a way to build money that is electronic cash, not quite like eCash that David Chaum envisioned, but it solved the problem of needing a centralized server in order to build a monetary system online. So again, as a just note on that, as I explained before, you need the bank running a server for eCash to work. But with Bitcoin, we don't need anyone specifically to run a server for us. The system is totally decentralized, and Bitcoin ultimately won. And now we have basically a base currency for the internet that everyone is free to use however they like. So that was in 2008 when Satoshi invented Bitcoin, which is around 20 years after eCash has died. So the history goes that we waited another 15 years or so until Bitcoin matured and was here to stay and also established itself as the base monetary unit for the internet. And in recent years, we have seen, again, new interests pop up in Chaumian Ecash, especially from the Bitcoin ecosystem. So two projects in the Bitcoin ecosystem right now are Fedimint and Cashu, which are both Chaumian Ecash implementations, which build on the same idea that I just described, but without the banks. So essentially, we're building custodial systems in a sense that can issue eCash to their users without any cooperation of any bank or so. You can just build it by yourself and then offer it as free and open source software. And this allows us to build all kinds of online services that we're already building today, but with much more increased privacy and efficiency and other nice things that you can do with eCash. So to make it very short, eCash basically allows us today to build something like Wallet of Satoshi, but with almost perfect privacy so that Wallet of Satoshi doesn't know that you are a user, how much you have in your wallet, and with whom you're transacting. I think these are the things that we will be talking about shortly. But essentially, and that's the thing to keep in mind, eCash is a way to build custodial applications with almost perfect privacy. And it should have been part of our lives 30 years ago, but unfortunately it failed. And now we're trying to fix the problem and see if we can build the system again on top of a free and open source system like Bitcoin, where you can innovate without permission.
That was an incredible primer on that. I can tell you may have talked about this before, but I love it. It's really important background, I think, and something that perhaps a lot of maybe more hardcore Bitcoiners really appreciate, but that many, I would say many Bitcoiners and certainly most of the normie population does not appreciate is just how messed up our current system for online payments is. If you think about just even using credit cards online, like every time you go to a website you want to check out, you're putting in all of that information. I mean, and not just basically like the private key to your credit card. You're putting in all of that detailed credit card information into a form, but you're also needing to put your billing address. All of that has to match. Like you are doxing yourself and exposing your personal financial information every time you want to make an online payment. That it's really kind of messed up when you think about it, that there isn't another way. Like you can't really buy something anonymously online. Until Bitcoin came along, there really wasn't a way to be able to do this. And it's something that I think we've just kind of like accepted as, well, this is just normal. This is just how things have to be done because we don't have another solution. And that's what I think is so exciting about all of the Ecash work that's coming out now, whether it be Fedi or, Cashew, is that this is an opportunity to do things right, to give people the choice, because that's what it all comes down to. If you want to put in your personal information, you don't care, fine, but you should have the choice. And I think that optionality is so important. Maybe, go ahead.
Yeah, just to comment on that, because I also think that we've basically found ourselves in a trap where we accepted the reality as a given. And, when you look back into the 90s, how it almost succeeded, you can see that after its failure and when eCash was off the table, only then PayPal and credit cards on the internet really pick up. So this was an opportunity to build systems from the beginning that respect our privacy. David Chaum himself said that in order to have a functioning democracy, you need privacy on a lowest level. In our society, it's very well accepted that we need privacy for communication, but especially your activity online, when you do small purchases, you just, you purchase maybe an MP3 song, or you want to read an article online and you pay for the paywall, or whatever it is, especially the smaller transactions that are not significant in an economic sense, leave all sorts of scary metadata about everyone, everywhere. And we have ended up in a system where this is not only the case, but also wanted, because this data is also used to monetize on you after the fact that you have paid, and is shared with multiple parties without you really understanding or giving consent to that. So Chaumin eCash is an attempt to fix especially smaller payments online, and to give users back the privacy where it matters, which is mostly online interactions and on a small scale that we already do every day, every day and everywhere.
And I think the other important piece there, because you mentioned both PayPal, but then credit cards. The other very important piece is that both of those are closed systems that you can be cut off from at a moment's notice. If you buy the wrong thing, if you say the wrong thing in a completely different silo, and then PayPal decides, sorry, this goes against our policies and you're no longer able to use our service. Well, now you're screwed. You can't use PayPal. Okay. Your bank cuts you off. You're not allowed to use your credit card. It's really, and I think a lot of Americans, as an American, I'll speak for Americans. A lot of Americans do not realize that is something that can actually happen to you. They don't realize it because it's never happened to them, but it's something that happens to people all over the world. I was talking with KG last week, who is building Machankura, and one of the reasons he started building that was because his bank shut down and froze his account because he was trying to buy rights to the Bitcoin standard online, and they just froze his account without warning. He couldn't get it back. That's something that sounds, crazy to a lot of Americans, but it's just a matter of time before these things happen to you. So it's nice to have options, and people don't realize, if you're cut off from the financial system, you are cut off from everything. How are you supposed to exercise your right to free speech if you can't buy a plane ticket to go to a protest? How are you supposed to exercise your right, again, to free speech online if you've been completely, shut off from being able to pay for a subscription, whatever it might be? It's a really important thing, both to have that privacy, but then to have at least the censorship resistant capability so that you can continue to exercise all your other rights, because money is really, being able to transact is the base layer of so many other exercises of rights. And I think that goes over a lot of people's heads. They look at them as separate things, but they're very much, conjoined.
Yes, absolutely. And this is also, I think it's always useful to think back of physical cash and what beautiful and simple privacy-preserving technology there is, and how well this is also accepted in our societies. And obviously, physical cash is being used less and less everywhere around the world because people prefer the convenience of paying with digital systems. And I understand that because it's more convenient to do. It becomes more and more popular. And with eCash, you can achieve a very similar privacy level as with physical cash, by building something very similar to that in the online space. And so I think there is this nice saying that says, if physical cash was invented today, it would probably be illegal, and that just gives you this perspective of how fast things can change in terms of what is accepted in society and what not, and especially what is deemed okay in society today can change very, very quickly in the future. And as free people of democratic nations, of people who support freedom, we should also support privacy, because without privacy we will not be able to exercise any of our rights in the future. So the conversation should go into a direction where we normalize privacy and enable it for everyone, because that's a train we clearly missed when we started building out the internet infrastructure that we have today. But I also am very optimistic about this, because in recent years we have seen developments that were not, that were unthinkable a couple of years ago, with end-to-end encryption and Nostr as decentralized social media, for example. Bitcoin obviously as unstoppable money that cannot be taken away from you. And Ecash is also part of that, because it allows you to build systems, custodial systems that are private, respect your privacy as an individual, and also cannot be censored arbitrarily. And we can get into that later when we describe a little bit more about the privacy features of Ecash, how that also gives you these unexpected features, for example, such as censorship resistance.
And perhaps that's actually a perfect segue into that, to talk a little bit about, because you use the term like near perfect privacy for Ecash. Can you explain kind of what that means in the context of Ecash? The idea of near perfect.
Yes, we can do that. So maybe it's useful to first think about how an ordinary custodial system works today, and what we can call what the systems are that we can call custodial systems. So when I say custodial systems, I usually mean a little bit more than the usual Bitcoiner, because custodial systems are much more widespread than you would think. So this is not only Wallet of Satoshi, for example, which is the biggest custodial Lightning wallet that I like to use as an example, but it extends to things like your Kraken account is a custodial account, obviously. Your bank account is a custodial account, but it also goes into weirder directions. For example, you could say that your Netflix subscription is also a custodial relationship, because you pay up front and then you expect the service in return, stretched over a window of 30 days, for example. So if you really want to go into a nuance, you can see custodial systems almost everywhere. And so the way these systems are all built, and this is not because these are evil people, but this is how you can build these systems, is using user tables, databases of transactions. So essentially, a Wallet of Satoshi server knows that user Walker has an account, and there are 120 Satoshis in his account, and he received them in the last 3 payments from this user, and that user. So there is a perfect log of all the transactions for every user in every custodial system, and that is because that's just how they work. So this is not to track you, this is just to make sure that you can do accounting correctly. So any of the systems that I mentioned work like that. Now Ecash is basically an inverted version of that. With Ecash, the server that is the custodian, so now let's imagine Wallet of Satoshi was a Cashew mint. So in that case, they would not hold a database of users and how much they have and so on, but instead they would give out digital bearer tokens, Ecash tokens, to every user, and the balance of every user would be determined by how much Ecash they have on their phone. So there is no database in which it says Walker has 120,000 Satoshis, but your balance as the user, as a user, is determined by how much Ecash you have stored in your phone, for example. So the server doesn't have a concept of an individual user. The server also doesn't know how much each individual user transacts and with whom they transact. The only thing now, when you want to send me, let's say 500 Satoshis from your Cashew wallet, and in that case, Wallet of Satoshi would be a Cashew wallet, then what you would do is you take some piece of that digital data and you send it to me over any kind of communication medium. It could be a Telegram message or a QR code or something. And I would take this data and store it on my phone again. And so that's how the balance would basically switch owners from one person to another. And the server, in the meantime, only makes sure that this cannot be double spent, but doesn't know which user interacted with which user. And that's what gives Ecash this quote-unquote near-perfect privacy. And I say near-perfect privacy because I like to be pedantic on this. There is no perfect privacy in the universe. I guess this can almost be stated as a mathematical fact, but it's also important to mention the conditions in which the privacy could be decremented also in an eCash system. One thing to be aware of is that every time you talk to a mint, there is an IP address, for example, associated with your request. So even if the mint doesn't know which user you are, there is a chance for the mint to figure out which IP address does which request with the server, and therefore they could deduce some kind of properties of your wallet with that. However, you can also fix that. You can use things like Tor. There are also methods to do the communication to the mint via a network like Nostr, where you don't see the IP addresses of the users. So there are ways to also mitigate this risk a bit more, but it's still something that everyone should be cognizant about.
I think that's a good way of explaining it, because you can almost think of privacy like sovereignty, where there's no perfect sovereignty, right? And there's no truly perfect privacy. You're kind of a curve asymptotically approaching that line. You can get closer and closer and closer to it, but you're never going to be, totally at 1. You're always going to be at, 0.999, whatever, repeating. You can never quite get exactly there, but you can do a lot of things to get yourself as close to there as possible. Much like Bitcoin will never exactly hit 21 million, it'll hit just below there, right? So it's about giving yourself the tools to be able to at least move along that curve, to get a little bit closer, to get near perfect. But I think that is an important. The pedantic description is good there, because we want to be honest about this. There are always going to be trade-offs, right? If you're trying to increase your own personal sovereignty and value open source technology, then head to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker for 5% off the Bitcoin-only BitBox02 hardware wallet. It's easy as hell to use, whether you're new to Bitcoin or a seasoned psychopath. It's Bitcoin only, and again, it's fully open source. You can head to their GitHub and check for yourself. There is no need to trust me. When you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off, but you also help support another fucking Bitcoin podcast. This one. So thank you. And I think one of those trade-offs that you might see people, I'm sure maybe you've gotten some pushback about this too, is Ecash is a custodial solution itself. Right, whether that be Fedimint, and maybe we can a little bit later go into kind of the distinction between Cashew versus Fedimint, one being a more community-based N number of mint operators versus the one. But it is a custodial solution, but it has significant advantages over what we think of as a Lightning custodial solution, such as Wallet of Satoshi. Wallet of Satoshi is a great platform. I no longer can use it in the USA, unfortunately, which is, again, one of the risks of being a little bit more centralized is they're worried about playing by certain rules, and I can't blame them. The US is not always the most friendly. So unfortunately, I can run it on a VPN, but technically I can't download it anymore on the US App Store. That's a bummer. But can you maybe explain a little bit, because you've gone into a bit of the difference. Okay, Wallet of Satoshi has all of these, these tables, all of these. They're not trying to track you, but they need to have that information as a way of doing business. Versus Ecash, where basically you don't need to know anything about it. Like I just downloaded the eNUTS wallet today and confused yourself and the actual developer of it on Twitter in a classic blunder on my part. But I loved going in there and seeing that there's no data collected. There is nothing that needs to be collected there. But can we talk a little bit specifically about the fact that the Ecash tokens are actually locally being stored on your device? They're not somewhere else. There's not somebody that can rug you from like what's on your phone, but a mint itself can be rugged to a certain extent. Can you talk about that kind of, because I think that's where people get a little bit confused.
Yes. So let's make that very, very clear from the beginning. The Ecash solutions that we're building on Bitcoin today are custodial. So no one should be confused about that. And if you're not interested in custodial solutions, you should definitely stay away from these technologies, because it is something where you give up your Bitcoin to the custody of a service provider, and that service provider then promises you a certain service. In that case, it would be honoring your redemption when you want to get your Bitcoin back, for example. So just that upfront, and I understand that many people are not interested in custodial solutions, and that is totally fine. Bitcoin gives us finally the option to not care about custodial solutions. Bitcoin is the only option that basically allows us to do that. And when you think of the fiat system, however, there is essentially no other way to be non-custodial than to have the cash under your mattress. There is no non-custodial digital way to transact with fiat. Now, why am I saying this is I'm a, let's say, incremental improver. I think it is worth improving systems that we already use, even if they are not perfect. And you could also argue that Bitcoin itself is not perfect. For example, it doesn't scale to 8 billion people without any significant changes that we would have to make. And also custodial systems are not perfect. Indeed, they're pretty bad in terms of your privacy. And also they have the custodial risk that you can be rugged at any moment. And Ecash does not improve on that. So Ecash does not improve the ruggability of a custodian. So the custodian, let's say the operator of Wallet of Satoshi, and I'm not implying that they would ever do that. I also like Wallet of Satoshi a lot, but it's just an example that many people know. The operator of Wallet of Satoshi could close down shop at any moment, or could be forced to close down shop, and all the Bitcoin that is on their node would be unavailable to their users. Right, so and Ecash solutions do not improve on this problem. So what Ecash does improve is to take custodial systems that already exist and add the almost perfect privacy on top of that. So in that sense, it is an incremental improvement of something that already exists, and I think that's worth pursuing, especially if you look at the real world activity of Bitcoiners, especially in the small transaction size realm where we are talking about zaps and tips and small payments online. Most people use Lightning for that, and most people actually use custodial Lightning for that and not their own node. So of course, we have to educate everyone to be non-custodial as much as they can, but we won't reach any point in a reasonable short future where we will be able to transact with 200 Satoshis in a non-custodial way with Bitcoin. And it's not even truly the case with Lightning. Some Lightning pros out there will know that for a transaction size below the dust limit, for example, not even a Lightning payment is truly enforceable until it's actually finished. So we have this problem, and this is a real problem. Now, with Ecash, as I said, you can improve custodial systems, and maybe it would make sense to again go one step back and think talk about this distinction between custodial Bitcoin but non-custodial Ecash, and how that comes together, and the way that it comes together in the way that we build these systems today. So a Cashew server, which could be run by anyone, so you can imagine this is maybe a company that runs a wallet, or this could also be a online shop where you can charge a balance or something like that. that company or service provider takes your Bitcoin and gives you eCash in return. And as I said before, eCash is a bearer instrument token, so it is a token that the mint generates for you, and that is worth, let's say, 200 satoshis. So you gave the mint 200 satoshis on the Lightning Network, and what you get back is a piece of digital data that is worth 200 satoshis, and that's a bearer token. And that is, when you remember my very first example in this recording today, I mentioned this contract that that the mint blindsides. This contract is eCash. So in digital form, this is a piece of eCash. Now it gives you back this eCash, and then you store it on your device. And I mean that literally, it is stored on the drive of your device and has no trace on the server, because the server doesn't actually know what it's looked like, because it closed its eyes, did this blind signing that I explained before. So you have eCash in your wallet, and there's Bitcoin on the server's wallet. So the Bitcoin is custodial, but the eCash itself cannot be taken away from you, because no one knows has ever seen the eCash except you. And that's the nice thing about eCash in general, because now if the server would like to censor, for example, you, Walker, because you did so many bad jokes on Nostr and you should be punished for that, for example, then the server in a classical sense could say, I don't like Walker, I'm going to turn off his money, and your account would be frozen. But with eCash, you cannot do that, because first of all, the server doesn't know about you. There is no account or anything. You just hold eCash, and the server cannot take away your eCash, because it doesn't know what it looks like. It has never seen it before. It cannot even censor your eCash. So there's only one thing that the mint operator can do, is either rug everyone, so take the Bitcoin and run, and then the server is basically down. And this is the same risk that, for example, I explained, like Wallet of Satoshi could close down and it's over. Or no one, or rug no one. There is no way to specifically censor one specific user that I don't like, and that's the beauty of eCash, and something also I think is a bit unintuitive, because as Bitcoiners we always know censorship resistance, and we equate it with custody, basically, or having, being sovereign. And that is very strongly coupled in the case of Bitcoin. But what eCash taught me is also in a custodial system, like with eCash, you can still be censorship resistant. And that's maybe surprising for some, because usually you wouldn't expect that something where you have to trust the custodian is not able to censor any specific user, and that is the case with eCash.
I think that's a really... you're right. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it's an important point. Yes, it's either rug all or rug none. It's like there is greater privacy and greater censorship resistance when there's strength in numbers. It's like the zebra. The zebra by itself sticks out, right? But a zebra in a herd is just a bunch of stripes. You can't tell who is what. They're all the same, right? And so you can't single out a particular zebra. You need to decimate the entire herd, right? But with eCash, there is still the ruggability at the server side from the mint operator to take all of that Bitcoin, in which case then that's not going to be a trusted mint operator anymore. Nobody's going to use, if you rug everybody, nobody's going to use anything you create in the future. And you can't just rug one person. You can't single out Walker for his terrible jokes and say, I'm taking just that guy's Bitcoin. So I think that that's a really important distinction there, and one that is easily lost, because we tend to, as you said, think, okay, you're either, totally unruggable or you are ruggable. But in this case, yeah, you're ruggable, but only if every other person is also rugged. So it doesn't remove that risk. It just removes your ability to be individually censored, because you have that near perfect privacy, and you can't be distinguished from that other herd of Bitcoin zapping zebras, which is kind of a nice visual that maybe I'll have to have AI generate. So actually, and this is a good segue into a question that was posted on Nostr that somebody wanted me to ask you. Is eCash cryptographically verifiable in an offline state? So it's being, is the Like, can you verify, yes, this is in fact my eCash token. It is here. It is related to this mint, even if you are offline and don't have connection to the mint at that time.
Okay, so we're starting to get into the interesting bits of the crazy things that you can do with eCash, because right now we've spent quite some time in explaining how the custodial risk situation is and the privacy, but eCash offers also some cryptographic magic that you can use to build really cool systems. So to answer the question, eCash tokens themselves, they have a signature of the mint. So as I explained in the very beginning, there's a contract that you have written, the mint has never seen, and there's a signature of the mint on that contract. So anyone can verify that signature. That means that if I show you, you're offline, and if I show you a piece of eCash token, you can, because you have remembered the public key of the mint before, you can verify the signature and say, yes, this was actually signed by the mint. However, we haven't talked about this, but maybe it would make sense to do it right now, what an ordinary eCash transaction usually looks like. So imagine I have some eCash in my wallet, it's stored in my wallet, and Walker, I want to send you 200 Satoshis. Now, as I explained before, maybe the smart, attentive listener already noticed that I was sending you a bearer token via QR code, for example. What basically hinders me from double spending the same token to another user? Let's say you want to sell me an apple. I give you the token, and while you're giving me the apple, I buy a banana with the same token. And now I have a banana and an apple, but I paid both of them with the same piece of money, and that would be obviously bad. So for a normal eCash transaction to finish, we still have to make one more step, which is I take the token and I send it to you. And now, before you give me the apple, you take the token and you send it back to the mint and say to the mint, hey mint, here's a 200 Satoshi token that you have never seen, but please give me another one in return and burn this one. So the mint, basically, upon receiving, you will send it to the mint and receive a new token immediately. And with that, I'm not able to spend the same token that I gave you to another person. So that's how the mint makes sure that eCash cannot be double spent. So that is cool. That is usually how every normal eCash transaction would work. But now, what happens if you're offline? Let's say you now, as a receiver, you're offline and you cannot talk to the mint immediately. So one thing that I could do is I could give you eCash with a signature and send it to you. And while you're offline, you're able to verify the signature of the mint and at least know that this is a valid token. It was validly signed by the mint, so this token was created at some point. However, the transaction is still not complete because you don't know whether I've spent this token, even though you verified the signature, whether I spent this token to anyone else. And so how could you fix that? And to enable truly offline payments where the receiver can remain fully offline, but the payment cannot be double spent, you have to do a few tricks before. And the trick we use here is called pay-to-pub-key. And pay-to-pub-key is a transaction type that we also know from Bitcoin. And essentially what pay-to-pub-key means is that you as a receiver, now you would give me your public key, and it's usually in Bitcoin, it's in form of a Bitcoin address. A Bitcoin address is a public key, so to speak, in most basic case. And now what I can do is I can spend Bitcoin to a public key. And that means in the blockchain, there will be an entry that says from Calle to Walker's public key, send 200 Satoshis. And now the transaction, now for you, in order to be able to spend this Bitcoin again, you would have to make a signature that proves that you have the private key to the public key that you have given me before. So that's how it works in Bitcoin. You give me your public key and I send money to your public key, and you can only spend it once you give a signature from your public key that only you can do. That's how we secure most normal Bitcoin transactions. So with eCash, we can do something quite similar to that, and it was indeed also inspired by basically how Bitcoin works. And what we do essentially is the same situation as before. You're offline and I am online. and I want to pay you. Let's say you have a little small like farmer's store shop, and you want to sell apples, but your internet connection is bad. You can still receive eCash that cannot be double spent by giving me your public key in form of a QR code, for example. And what I can do now with the eCash on my phone, for example, I can send it once to the Mint and redeem it for new eCash, but this new eCash is a little bit more special. This new eCash that I redeem for my own eCash is now locked to a public key, similar like a Bitcoin transaction is locked to a public key. So I just communicate with the Mint once and redeem, like send the Mint 200 Satoshis from my phone, and I receive 200 Satoshis again from the Mint, but this time I cannot spend these 200 Satoshis anymore, only you can spend these 200 Satoshis, because it's locked to your public key. And that means now, while you can be offline, I can send you this eCash token, and you can just look at it, essentially just look at it, verify the signature of the Mint and say, okay, this is okay. And then verify that it was indeed locked to your public key and say, this is okay. And then the transaction is complete. And this is quite magical, because this token, now once you have seen it, you just have to perceive the token once, you can be sure that it cannot be double spent by anyone else, and the transaction is complete. So this is cool because you don't have internet. There's a final transaction. We just did a half offline transaction, and that's very cool. But this idea, you can just go crazy with this idea, and this is what we're doing, obviously. For example, what you can do with this is also ultra fast payments, and like I need to say ultra or some even more extreme form of that word, because I think this is the fastest possible payment that I can think of. Is now imagine you're an offline service provider. You're not offline. You're a service provider, and you want to sell me individual video frames of a YouTube video, right? So you want to get paid 25 times a second. Let's say you want that. Now, what I could do as a user of your service, I could take eCash and pre-lock all of the eCash to your public key and keep it on my drive. And then send for each frame that I request from you, I can send you eCash during a direct channel between us, and you can just look at the eCash. You don't even have to do a round trip with the Mint, which would take some time. You can literally just look at it and store it in your database, and the transaction is complete. And with that, I can send thousands of payments to you that all will succeed with 100% certainty. And that all will take maybe, 15 milliseconds, or depending on the internet connection between us two, to reach you. And so this is something that we're exploring. And with this payment types, you can probably scale this to the thousands of payments per second type of situations for extreme streaming kind of situations where you want to do value for value on a second or millisecond basis, or a couple of hundred millisecond basis, and so on.
That is a pretty wild concept to think about, and your explanation of the kind of offline verifiability makes a lot more sense to me now, because that's something I was kind of wondering about as well. I was glad to see this question get asked. It means I'm not alone in my curiosity there. So that's basically, to just very simply recap. If you have these eCash tokens and you want to send them to me and I'm offline, as long as one person, you have a connection to the Mint, you can lock them to my public key, and then when you receive those back, I cannot go and send those to Pablo or to Will. They are, you cannot. They are just locked to Walker. That is now Walker's eCash, and when I come back online, connect with the Mint, I will then have those eCash bearer tokens in my own custody, correct?
Exactly. That's exactly how it works, yeah.
That's really cool. And the ability so this is, when you talk about micropayments kind of at scale and at ultra speed, we're talking actually faster than Lightning has the capability of communicating to, right? It's actually like on another level from Lightning, or do you put it at comparable to Lightning?
Oh yeah, it's strictly faster than Lightning. So
okay.
Lightning is already pretty fast if it works well, right? You can get a Lightning payment in under a second, but I'm talking below few dozen milliseconds here. So
Wow.
a Lightning payment can also be very fast in special cases. For example, when you have a direct channel and you don't do any Lightning routing, you can also get to very impressive speeds with Lightning, but most payments won't be over a direct channel. For some high-speed applications, that might actually be useful to set up a certain situation where you have a direct connection between two participants of a transaction. But in the normal case, this won't be the case. This won't be. So you would usually do a couple of hops until you reach the destination, and then information again needs to travel backwards for the transaction to be complete. Here in this case, I could send it to you via a laser signal, and then we could do a transaction with the speed of light, basically, as long as you can read the data, then verify the signature and store it in your database. And that's all you need to do. And I mean, for fast modern computers, these operations don't take more than 1 millisecond together. So most of the time is spent on the way to you through the internet. But with with something like a QR code scanner, for example, then that's pretty much instant. Yes.
That is really quite cool to think about, like that. You know, Lightning already being insanely lightning fast, but to take that to another level where you're talking about really as near real time as you could just about possibly get with this, while still also dealing with a bearer instrument, which is pretty powerful. And I think that that's maybe one thing, at least for me, and I think for some others probably, when first hearing about Ecash, is something that maybe trips people up a little bit, because they hear about Ecash and these Ecash tokens. And perhaps it's because of all of the crypto world jargon that's thrown around about tokens and everything else. People get a little bit confused and think, well, hold on, am I not dealing with Bitcoin here? And I think what you've kind of explained in these couple of these previous notes that you've made is that the Bitcoin, these are bearer assets that allow you to redeem Bitcoin from the server. The server, the mint operator, mint issuer, has the Bitcoin. These are bearer tokens in your custody that give you the claim basically to say, I want this Bitcoin right now. I want the 69,420 Satoshis, however many it is, but I have the digital bearer instrument that allows me to do that. And something you touched on earlier is something I've actually been thinking about a lot recently, which is in the fiat world, the only way to actually have self-custody of your fiat tokens, your dollars in my case, is to have them in cash. Literally physical cash. That is the only way. There is no way to have custody, actual self-custody of digital fiat instruments. It's impossible. It's always, even if, in the case of a CBDC, you certainly don't have custody then. If it's on your Federal Reserve wallet, they can rug individual users with startling precision and accuracy. It is, and if you're using a bank, we all know the money in your bank is not really yours. They're holding an IOU for you, but that can also be taken from you. So I think that that's a really important thing that is often lost. Yeah, cash is wonderful. I found myself starting to use physical cash more the deeper I started going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, because I was like, well, man, cash is actually pretty wonderful. I can just hand this to somebody and it's theirs, and nobody else needs to be watching this transaction. That's a beautiful thing. Ecash is now giving you the ability to have that digital cash-like bearer transaction with the same amount of privacy. Because cash, okay, you and I give each other I give you a $10 bill. Somebody could still be watching and sees that I handed you a $10 bill. Sure, it's not perfect privacy there either, but it's near perfect, especially compared to using a debit card, using a credit card, using whatever else. So that's a pretty incredible thing, I think. Maybe I'd like to talk a little bit about the overlap between Ecash and Nostr, and how you've now it was you that created npub.cash, right?
No, that is.
It was also not you. Man, I just assume anything to do with eNUTS and is just related to you. So this is again
No,
I
just
need
want to
to
make
make some
clear that
apologies.
I work a lot on Cashew and I started it, and but most of the work that people see today, especially the visual stuff in apps and all the beautiful things that people have been building, is from the community. So there are many different developers who are building on their own project on the Cashew protocol, and I can recommend, for example, the eNUTS, eNUTS.cash wallet, or for Android users, also the minibits.cash wallet. These are two very excellent phone wallets that you can try today to play around with Ecash and Cashew. And npop.cash was made by another hacker, not me, and that is a website that allows you to receive eCash tokens using a Nostr public key. Should we talk about what we do on Nostr with eCash?
I would love to, yeah, and I'd like to apologize also to the developers out there. I'll make sure to get I'll link all of this in the show notes so I can give proper attribution. But for anyone listening, I apologize.
No worries. I'm pretty sure they will forgive you. So Nostr, yeah. So as I said before, for eCash to be transmitted from one person to a person, you need some sort of a communication channel, and the easiest way of doing it today, and remember, an eCash token is a bare instrument, and what it actually looks like for a user is it looks like a random piece of string. It's a piece of data, like a scrambled random piece of string that always starts with Cashew. And you can copy this piece of string and you can put it into an email and send it to your grandma, for example. And your grandma will see this piece of data in the email and then just take it and put it in her eCash wallet. So that's how the transaction could work. You can also do it with QR codes or whatever you want, basically, to send around data between phone and user and so on. So now, obviously, as Bitcoiners, we're very focused on Nostr as a social network that an unruggable social network that cannot be turned off. And so on Nostr, and it turned out pretty quickly when we started working on Cashew, which was coincidentally very close to when Nostr was picking up. We noticed very early that Nostr is an ideal place to send around eCash from and to users because it has several very nice features that we can make use of in Cashew. So first of all, in Nostr, everyone has an identity. You have an npub, everyone knows that's you, it's not just an impersonator. I can look up your follower count and see this is indeed you and it's legit and so on. So there's kind of a identity and a web of trust already just by being a social network with people interacting with each other. And that is already a huge, huge thing. I think it's still undervalued, this property of Nostr. And I have to remind you, like the last successful attempt at doing something like that was PGP. And it's very, very old. Like you would have key servers and people would have to attest that they know you and so on. Like it was very, very chaotic and not really useful, at least from point of view of today. And with Nostr, you just get that for free by just following someone, shitposting with them, interacting, and then you get some credibility that this is indeed the person. And so we have that. And at the same time, we also have a network to send around nodes and other things transmitted over relays, right? So while most users know Nostr from its social media application side, many app developers also really love Nostr because they can use these identities on a network that also provides the rails to send the data to these identities. And in the case for Cashew, what we do is essentially, I think all Cashew wallets today have some sort of Nostr capability. And what you can do in them is you just when you have your wallet open, which says 1,000 Satoshis in your balance, for example, you can click on a contacts tab, and then you will see all your friends that you follow on Nostr. And with a click of a button, you can just send money to them, even if they don't have a Cashew wallet. You can just take a piece of eCash from your wallet and send it over an encrypted direct message to them. So what they will see, if they don't have a Cashew wallet, they will just see a random string appear, and if they have a Nostr client that shows them the eCash in a nicely visual rendered form, like in Amethyst and in Snort, and I believe it's coming to Primal, and it's already also in Nostrudel, I think. So then it will show up as a nicely rendered eCash token payment made to you. So you will see that Calle just sent you a DM, and in that DM there was some money for you. And if you have a Cashew wallet that supports receiving on Nostr, it might even see that automatically, and immediately you will see it in your wallet balance just go up. So I can pay you directly using a Nostr relay between us, basically, and only you can read the message because it's a direct message that is encrypted. So this is what we have been focusing on so far, and this is what the apps have built. And now, in the last couple of days, we have more fascinating and interesting stuff coming up. So one thing that you mentioned already is npub.cash, and this is a service that basically gives every Nostr user a Lightning address, whether they know it or not. So with npub.cash, you can basically, it generates an infinite amount of the different Lightning addresses. So you can think your npub, so it might be this scrambled number, your npub at npub.cash is a Lightning address that works. And if anyone sends Bitcoin to that Lightning address, the Lightning payment to that address will be converted into eCash nuts, and they will be stored or waiting for you to pick up on Nostr, but they will be stored until you come back online, and then you can go to npub.cash, log in with your Nostr signing extension, so there are no user signups or accounts or any shenanigans like that. You just sign up with your signing extension, and then you see the eCash waiting there for you that was generated while you were offline. With a click of a button, you can either pay it directly to your Lightning wallet, or you can redeem the eCash directly on a different Cashew wallet. So this is one project I'm very excited about, because we're building it in a general way so that it can be used also by other Cashew wallets as a backend for Lightning addresses. So instead of every Cashew wallet having to implement some way to do Lightning addresses for them, we imagine that npub.cash will have a nice API that can be used by anyone, also be run by anyone themselves, so it doesn't have to be on that domain. And you can get Lightning address support for every eCash wallet, basically that way.
It's really cool. And I just, yesterday or the day before, I started playing around with npub.cash. And for anyone listening, you can just go to npub.cash on your browser, and you can try this out. You can claim a username for a few sats, or you can just use your, as Calle said, your existing npub, and then it'll just be at npub.cash. It's really easy to use, and I just signed in. I was using Albi, so just use that browser extension to securely sign, and then I'm good to go. It was super easy. I'm curious because there's a little bit of a difference between that and eNUTS. Now, eNUTS, when I was setting that up, which is now live on the App Store, I think the Play Store too, I'm not sure, but I know the App Store for sure, because I just downloaded it today. You can search eNUTS. On there, I did not have to sign it with my private key. I just had to put in my public key, and then it said that it was deriving a special private key for me based on that public key. So there was no need to do any sort of secure sign in there, no data collected, of course. Can you explain the difference there? So that's not, is that basically specific to the eNUTS wallet then on my device? It's deriving a new private key for me based on my public key, because I populated my whole address book. I sent 69 sats to you in the form of some eCash, because it was super easy. I just searched for Calle, boom. All my Nostr contacts are imported. I sent it, done. But can you explain the difference there between kind of npub.cash versus eNUTS, and maybe if there's, you mentioned opening up an API for npub.cash, that obviously gives a lot more interoperability benefits, but are there some other benefits to the deriving a new private key from the public key like eNUTS does?
So this is something that the developers of both eNUTS and minibits are currently exploring, is what are the UX implications for both of these methods. Because it would be best if the developers themselves would comment on this, but from what I have witnessed there was in the beginning also a concern about privacy and data safety to ask users to enter their NSEC, so their Nostr private keys, into yet another application. That means that if you don't want to do that, that means that the app that you're using cannot read your direct messages. So what I just explained, with someone sending you Ecash to your Nostr account, the wallet wouldn't be able to see that. In order to circumvent that, both applications, minibits and eNUTS, do it slightly differently, but essentially they derive you a new set of keys. So it's a new private key that is only associated with that wallet, and all the direct messages to that private key and public key pair that are going there will end up in your inbox that the wallet can then pick up. So it adds definitely some privacy. Not everyone on the Nostr network can see who paid whom, because on Nostr you can see all the activity metadata, and so it definitely improves the privacy. However, it also causes a little bit of confusion for the user itself, because the user now needs to know, okay, I have my social key, now I have my wallet key, and then there is another key, and so this has to be communicated either very mindfully to the user, or some other technique should be considered, I guess. So they might want to consider also entering your NSEC eventually, I don't know, or using something like an NSEC bunker, what Pablo is working on. So have a remote signing software running somewhere else that can sign without you having to enter your private keys into the wallet itself. But at the end of the day, both work with Nostr identities, so as well as npub.cash or eNUTS and minibits, and the idea is mostly the same. I want to be able to know your npub or a npub that reaches you, and I'm just throwing eCash to that npub, and whoever has the private keys for that npub can read the eCash and then redeem the eCash.
Okay. So there, like with anything, there are some trade-offs. The version that eNUTS is using could be argued that perhaps it's a little bit more private because it's not actually associating, like it's creating a new identity derived from your existing social npub that you're using. So it's, it's again a question of optionality, a question of choice. What does the user want to do? If they want to use, npub.cash, great, that'll be signed with their private key via a signing extension. If they want to use eNUTS, they just need the public key, and you'll get a new private key derived from that, and some trade-offs to both. But okay, I appreciate that clarification, because I was kind of wondering a little bit about that there. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about just where, what else are you excited about in terms of building on Nostr, or the implementations that may be possible that are now made possible on Nostr because of Ecash? Do you think that this is, you mentioned that a lot of these Nostr clients are implementing Cashew already, so that they'll be able to have that back end and interface with all of these other services that are being built around Ecash. But what else, as you look toward the future, what are you kind of excited about there that you see, wow, this is something with these two things together, Nostr and Ecash, we can now do things that we could have only, hoped for at an earlier stage?
So I think what comes to my mind here is especially improving zaps on Nostr. Right now we have, everyone knows zaps and loves zaps, and it's also one of the reasons that Nostr is so extremely fun to use, is that you can get lightning zaps, a lightning tip, very small lightning payment to a post that you make, and if it's a good post, then you get even more, and that really drives the social layer of Nostr, and that is great, I think. But one of the downsides of this is, first of all, Obviously, it drives people to use custodial systems. We have seen from statistics that I think around 90% of all the Lightning addresses on Nostr are custodial. And I would argue using a Chormin eCash custodian would be strictly better for your privacy there. So there is definitely something that we can improve in what we do today, just by using, for example, more using Cashew wallets and building Cashew wallets. But another thing that I think we will be able to do very soon, this is something that we're working on kind of right now, is to also do zaps that are not Lightning, but zaps that are eCash. So we want to be able to tip a post or a person very similarly in the UX like it is right now, but the payment will not be a Lightning payment, but it will be an eCash payment. And that eCash token, and it's perfect again for Nostr because the token, the data itself is the payment. So you don't have to query a Lightning server, and then the Lightning server has to respond back to the Nostr network and give some sort of a certificate. And this is how zaps work today. It's kind of a complicated thing, but it must be done like that because the Nostr network itself doesn't have any way to verify that the payment was made actually. So the Lightning service provider that receives the zap actually gives back a receipt for everyone to see, and then render that 200 satoshis was tipped to this post. So we want to improve that with eCash, namely by combining all of the things that we have already talked about today. So it will be possible to, you will write a post on Nostr, and if I like this post in my Nostr client, I'll just press a zap button, and instead of doing a Lightning payment, it will take some eCash from my balance and just and lock it to your npub. So we can lock the eCash to your npub. The same thing as I explained before with pay to public key. And we can also give this proof of the signature so that I can post this eCash token, just check that it's a valid signature from the mint, and they can just look at the eCash and see that the signature is indeed valid. And they can also check that this eCash token was locked to the intended recipient. So, for example, I'm zapping you. Everyone can check this is actually your npub. So they can see that there must have been a payment from one user to another user for this specific post. And that's all you need, basically, in order to be able to render the zap counter in your Nostr client. And then everyone will see that 200 satoshis have been zapped to that post. And this is really cool because it opens up many new possibilities of things that you can do. For example, the clients themselves could, first of all, the Nostr clients themselves could, first of all, just decide that they will only render zaps from eCash mints that they know that they are legit. So it's not, they could decide that only a set of mints will be rendered, and the other ones are just random mints that they don't like or don't know or don't trust, so they wouldn't render them. That's possible. Another thing that is also possible is that you can even use this with different currencies. So eCash itself, as I said, is a separate technology from Bitcoin, but we are building it on Bitcoin and for Bitcoin. But so I know that Fiat Jeff would like to separate Nostr more from Bitcoin because there's this need for more users from a diverse more diverse group than just Bitcoiners. I mean, you could argue about that, whether it's a good idea or not. But if you would want to do that, you could even do, I don't know, fiat zaps, if you like, or some other currency, or just do zaps maybe that are not backed by anything. It's just a play money, a zap money that was issued by the Nostr relay or something like that. So it gives you more flexibility for the actual payment currency that you want to support. And it allows you to do crazy scripting on top of the eCash. So you could do, I don't know, a multi-sig eCash zap, or do a eCash zap with a timeout that you can redeem back if the user didn't redeem it in let's say, in a 2-week period, and things like that. So all of these things are then just possible with eCash because you can use all the different features of eCash and just use it on top of a social network.
That's really cool. I mean, do you think that we see like individual Nostr clients just becoming mints themselves? So they say, look, you can, we'll basically issue tokens we'll be the server here. We're already providing you with the service. Like basically, you see you start seeing more integration between the Ecash wallet and the Nostr client, just kind of blending into one almost. Is that something, or do you think they'll stay more separate and just kind of tie into each other as we're sort of seeing now?
I think for now it will probably stay more separate because these are two very different obligations or responsibilities: running a mint and running a Nostr relay or writing a client for Nostr. However, I can see how these things merge in the future, because Ecash allows you to also monetize all sorts of things on your own, like digital monetization of your content or service on the internet. So I imagine Ecash mints to not only be run for custody for Bitcoin wallets, the way that we're using them today, but they can also be run in the backend of a digital service provider. So I mentioned already the video streaming service, for example, that might want to run mint just for the video streaming service. So now we're not talking about an interoperable money like Satoshis, but we're talking about access right to a service that is paid by Satoshis. So you can do these closed systems of Ecash where you just want to provide your users perfect privacy and enjoy all the other cool things that you can do with Ecash. There might be this video service, but it could also be a Nostr relay provider. And I believe a Nostr relay provider could try to fund its operations like that very easily. So you could you could just run an Ecash mint next to your Nostr relay, and users of the Nostr relay would have to top up a balance, and you would maybe get like a certain percentage of that as some kind of a fee, and the rest could be used for Zaps, for example. So I can imagine how services generally trying to monetize will use Ecash, because it just is way easier to integrate than a normal table-based custodial system where you need user data and so on and so forth. With an Ecash mint, you just run the mint, it just checks for double spending, and that's it. So it's much easier to implement on the one side. At the same time, you also get like perfect privacy for the users, which is a great thing to offer, obviously.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to see kind of how this continues to evolve, because just playing around with it already, it's just fun. And by the way, how did you decide to just to call Cashew and to call Ecash nuts? And like, was it just fuck it, let me name it this, or was there is there something like technical behind it that gave you the idea to call it that?
Well, actually, it's a good question. So it's definitely fuck it, we'll go with this type of situation. Definitely the energy is very, joke heavy, and we like to have fun. I mean, we're spending most of our time working on this stuff. So we demand to have fun while doing so. And this is our attempt by just making everything a bit more joyful by making jokes. And our theme is nut-based because I think it started with the word cashew, because you have cash in the word cashew, and I just love cashews. This is literally true. I'm doing a little OPSEC fail here, but I'll tell you, I eat my 200 grams of cashews every day because I just love them so much. So maybe not every day, but I'm exaggerating here. So I love nuts, and nuts are atomic. They are small little pieces. You can send them around, so it's nice to imagine. And somehow this meme got much larger than the project itself by now. So everyone is just going with it, and we'll see how far we can drive this nut.
I love it, and I love cashews too, for what it's worth. They're a great nut. Okay, because I was always curious about that. I was like, is there something deeper? But I like the cashew. It's a great nut. DEEZ nuts, roll with it. I like the idea. You should have fun when you're building really badass open source tech. I think that's a good goal to have there. Another question for you, because I think there's obviously a lot of talk about Fedimint right now, and a lot of talk about Cashew. These are two different protocols. Can you explain a little bit the difference between kind of the federated model of Fedimint, the non-federated model of Cashew, and then where the crossover is? Because they're both still dealing with Ecash, but with kind of different purposes for their what their end use case is, right?
Yes, exactly. So Fedimint is an amazing piece of engineering. So it's a federated eCash system, which means that almost everything that I said applies to Fedimint as well. So it's an eCash system. Xiaomi eCash system works very much the same with a bit of different cryptography. So it's not interoperable with Cashew in the sense that you cannot take a Cashew token and pay it in a Fedimint federation or vice versa. But the underlying principles are very much the same. So you pay your Bitcoin to a service. The service gives you some eCash, and then you transact with the eCash inside the system until you want to make a Bitcoin payment again. So that's also how Fedimint works. But the crucial difference between Cashew and Fedimint is that you have a federated mint, and that means that a single mint, in the case of Fedimint, is not run by one party, but by n parties. So let's say you have a quorum. You can also have a quorum. So you have a quorum of 3 out of 5, for example. That will mean in the case of Fedimint that there are 5 different servers, and they all have to agree, or at least 3 of them have to agree in order to make one eCash payment. And that is great because, first of all, it's a big engineering challenge to do that, and they've successfully done so. And secondly, it improves the rug risk for the entire mint substantially. So that means, obviously, if you just trust one party, then you have to put all your trust in that party. And in the case for Fedimint, you can spread your trust across multiple participants, and they would then have to collude in order to take everyone's Bitcoin and run away. So that really improves the custodial risk for Fedimint. And I think that also fits a lot on their kind of mission that they're following. And as far as I understand, Fedimint is all about community custody, so they want to give people the ability to transact with Bitcoin if they cannot run their own Lightning node or if they cannot use on-chain payments themselves because of fees and complexity and so on and so forth. So in that case, Fedimint allows you to find a trusted group of people and then deposit your Bitcoin there and use their eCash service in return. And that's great. For Cashew also allows you to build a similar system. So you can imagine a wallet provider, for example, running a Cashew mint, but it's always going to be, at least for the time being, it's going to be a single trusted party that you give your Bitcoin to, and then you use their eCash system. Now, the reason why we don't consider a federated model right now, though, is that we really want to focus on the efficiency. So the goal of Cashew is to build a system that can cover a very wide range of applications. So we focus a lot on the protocol design and spelling it really out for other developers to implement. And we want multiple implementations to be there for different use cases. And when I say a wide range of applications, I mean very small scale applications like a single website with a few hundred users that wants to run an eCash mint for one specific purpose, for example, or an eCash mint, maybe even running on a small integrated board of low value hardware because you have a vending machine somewhere, for example, that wants to use eCash. So it should be applicable for these very small scale scenarios. But at the same time, we're working also on making this system scale to thousands and tens of thousands of concurrent users. So we want to build Cashew such that you can do tens of thousands of transactions per second, which is the scale you need for very big applications. If you can imagine, I don't know, maybe it's going to be the Bitcoin banks of the future. Maybe it's going to be the social media providers of the future that have some kind of an eCash mint running, and they need extreme levels of throughput. And this is something that you cannot really achieve if you have a federated consensus system that also needs where you have 5 servers to always keep up with everyone else. And so that just introduces delays and complexity. But again, Fedimint is amazing software. I urge everyone to check it out. And I think for Cashew, we will see wallet providers doing that, but we will also see more exotic and diverse use cases of eCash that I can probably not think of already now.
I appreciate the clarification. So you could essentially, in a very simplified way, think of it as Cashew single sig versus Fedimint multi-sig in terms just at a a way of thinking about it. You've got, X of N versus just one of one, in terms of the model for the mint itself, but the actual eCash, the issuing of the bearer tokens, that is basically, besides some cryptographic differences, essentially the same concept there. Fair summary?
Yes, that's a good summary.
Okay. So I want to be conscious of your time here, and I have two other small things I want to get into. Well, they're actually, I lied, they're not small, but they're big questions. But I'll go to the first one that I think is perhaps more generally interesting to people, which is, you talk about scaling. You mentioned earlier, and I think this is pretty well known, is that Bitcoin self-custody in its current state is not going to scale to 8 billion people, right? This is has been known by people who are familiar with it for some time. It appears that folks perhaps on Twitter are just now figuring this out. But I'm curious because the more I learn about eCash, the more I look at it as a scaling solution, a way to scale on top of Bitcoin at another layer of Bitcoin, to utilize Bitcoin still as that base layer money, still as that reserve that's being kept in the mint, but give people a privacy preserving, a better privacy, near perfect privacy way to interact with Bitcoin, also very, very quickly. I view that as a way to scale Bitcoin to many, many more people. But then there's the question of scaling Bitcoin at the base layer and changes to be made. So I'm just curious, as somebody who has worked on Bitcoin, on Lightning, now on eCash, you have a really good holistic perspective of this entire space, starting from the base layer through the other layers. How do you approach that problem just from like a logical perspective? How do you think about scaling Bitcoin versus scaling Bitcoin in layers, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, so in that question, I'm also a little bit pedantic. And I think here in this case, it's even more important to be pedantic because the question of scaling Bitcoin is really something that you can attack from many different angles. When some people say scaling Bitcoin, sometimes they only mean scaling Bitcoin economically, in a sense that more people participate in Bitcoin somehow. So in some sense, you could say that Coinbase scales Bitcoin because tens of hundreds of thousands, I don't know, maybe millions of users use Coinbase and use Bitcoin in some way, even though these users won't be touching the base chain, don't hold their own keys, and in a very strict sense are not using Bitcoin, but they're using a database that Coinbase provides. So there's this way of looking at it, but the other more challenging and more important way of looking at Bitcoin scaling is the technical scaling of Bitcoin. And what do we mean by that? And usually what we mean by that is scaling the number of people who can use Bitcoin in a sovereign way. And in a sovereign way means that you hold your keys and your money cannot be taken away from you, even if you don't cooperate, or if you're part of a layer. That also means that you should be able to exit that layer at any moment once you don't want to use this layer anymore. So let's take Lightning as an example, and why this is a true scaling technology for Bitcoin is in Lightning, you put your Bitcoin into a multisig with someone. So you hold keys. You're not the only holder of that multisig keys. It's also your channel partner. And then you can use Bitcoin very, very fast, and it scales greatly, and the number of Bitcoin transactions can go 1000x or something like that. So, and crucially, you can also exit Lightning whenever you want. So even if your peer goes offline, you can always force close the channel, and then if you did something wrong, your peer will be able to punish you in the way that Lightning currently works. But it's very important that you can choose to exit the relationship at any moment, and you pay your on-chain fees, and the Bitcoin is again in your hardware wallet. So, and that, I think that is a necessity for anything to be considered a scaling solution for Bitcoin. And I say this, people tell me that Ecash scales Bitcoin or Cashew scales Bitcoin, and I tell them no, it does not. So as Bitcoiners, we cannot, and I see this over and over in discussions, and I just want to be very frank and direct upfront with it. Ecash does not scale Bitcoin. Ecash is just something that was waiting for Bitcoin to exist. So we built Ecash is separated from Bitcoin. It allows many more users to participate in Bitcoin economically, but it does not change the fundamental issues of Bitcoin, which are scaling related. So as Bitcoiners, we cannot be lazy and just hope that some form of custodial system or delegated system or anything, federated custody system or something will save our asses and kind of fix the fee or block size or transaction speed or UTXO ownership problem, however you want to express it. So don't get lazy and don't see Ecash as a solution to the scaling problem, because it is not. And so that rant aside, I think there are still ways that we can scale Bitcoin, and this goes into the direction of covenants, for example, is a topic that is being discussed very actively now, and it allows solutions, true scaling solutions, like the Lightning Network also offers in a sense, that now we're thinking a lot about UTXO co-ownership. So instead of just being able to hold your own UTXOs, maybe one UTXO could be owned by multiple people, and they could be in a kind of an arrangement together, where still everyone who wants to exit that arrangement can do so at their own will. So there are still these conditions for a true scaling solution, where you are sovereign and you hold keys and you can exit whenever you want. These are the goals of scaling solutions, for example, using an opcode update like opctv, and all the different proposals that we've seen, like ARC or payment timeout trees and so on and so forth. So there are multiple things on the table. But again, I want to say Ecash is not one of them. Ecash allows us to build the best custodial systems that exist today anywhere, and it also allows us to improve other payment technologies or monies, so to speak. So you could even fix fiat banking with Ecash, but obviously that is not a way to scale Bitcoin. So just making that example, I'm making that example to make it very clear that it's a separate thing, and it does not improve or fix the base layer of Bitcoin, which is what we should focus on when we talk about scaling.
I really appreciate that clarification, because it is very easy to, and I'm sure that I myself am guilty of this at times, of saying that this, as I just said, is Ecash a scaling solution for Bitcoin? I appreciate the clarification that no, it is not. It is separate. It provides a valuable service that Bitcoin happens to be the perfect monetary medium to use with that service, which we did not have before until Bitcoin was discovered. But it is not a strict scaling solution for Bitcoin itself. So I appreciate that clarification. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, which is perfectly segues from the last thing you said, which is fiat banking rails and Ecash. I know that I think the Bank of International Settlements put out a report. I want to say it was maybe in November, maybe it was before that, but it was about Project Turbilin or something similar to that, where they're basically trying to demonstrate eCash or cash-like anonymity for CBDCs using eCash. I know this is probably a very big topic and we don't have much time, but can you just give me your kind of overall thoughts on this? And do you think that is this just an exercise in futility for central bankers? Because realistically, I don't think they don't want their CBDCs to have cash-like privacy-preserving features. I mean, unless they are much more altruistic than I currently believe. I'm curious of your take on this.
Yes, so this is also something I ask myself, is what are the intentions of these campaigns? But to summarize for people who might not have seen this, is at least for the ECB, European Central Bank proposal of how to build a CBDC, this is the case, is that there are multiple different applications for how to build a CBDC, and most of them are from big banks and big financial institutions. But one of those proposals is a system called GNU-Taler, and this is another significant eCash project out there. And I would say with Fedimint, Cashew, and GNU-Taler are probably the three most well-known eCash projects, and GNU-Taler is an eCash project built for fiat. And it has its own problems. It's not ideal, and I'm not the biggest fan of it, although, because of some of its properties. But anyway, it is still, and this is something, this is a strong statement, but among privacy-aware people, it is generally accepted that a CBDC built on eCash would be the best CBDC that we can currently think of. And this sounds like kind of an oxymoron, but you have to integrate this into your brain. Something that can be bad can also be better than something even worse. And so this is how I see GNU-Taler, and also the project that you've mentioned from the Bank of International Settlement. I think it is based on GNU-Taler. I'm not quite sure, but I think it goes into the same direction. Now, the question is, why are they doing this? Why don't they just do a full-on PayPal account-based CBDC and the server at the central bank? And trust me, you will get it. So we will have the full controllable, transparent CBDC that can be completely controlled. But I think there is at least in the case of the ECB, some significant public pressure of the public, of stakeholders, of privacy advocates, of politicians in the EU itself, to push for privacy-preserving alternatives. Because even in our Bitcoin bubble, we sometimes think that the entire world is against us, and they don't value the things that we value, and that's not really the case. So if you look into the activity going on around the CBDC, there are also many critical people about CBDCs who are not Bitcoiners. Obviously, Bitcoiners know most about CBDCs probably from any of these groups, because we're challenging this paradigm directly. But also in the realm of the more established people who comment on this in this banking world, there's also voices that say we need some level of privacy. And this is not, you won't get privacy for everything that you do. I don't believe in that at all. But you might get privacy for smaller amount transactions. This is something that, you can find also quotes by central bankers who hypothesize with the idea of maybe allowing a small balance of 300 euros or something that you can use privately. They don't say explicitly which technology would qualify for that, but for me it's pretty obvious and clear that they are considering, or the only solution that really would make sense is an eCash solution for those cases. So I would not be completely surprised if we get a full-on totalitarian CBDC plus an eCash solution on the side of that, and the eCash solution somehow allows us or the users of that CBDC to do private transactions on a small scale, and that is already better than nothing. But I'm pretty sure that you won't get privacy in general for CBDCs, because that's not the point.
Yeah, it's maybe they end up using the small scale private transactions, only up to 300 euro or something like that, as their justification for, look, we gave you the privacy here, but if you want to do anything larger than that, then we're going to be a bunch of totalitarian surveilling dictators on top of you, and there's nothing you can do about that. Maybe it's the kind of foot in the door technique to appease the privacy advocates, and then they can still roll out their full scale dystopian central bank digital currency. I don't know, that almost is more worrisome that they use the foot in the door like that in some ways. I don't know. We'll see.
That could be. That's I think a general question that is hard to answer. I have problem answering it myself. Is whether providing half privacy solutions is better than providing no privacy solutions at all. This is a topic in and of itself. Same could be asked for systems that are not perfect, like Tor or Signal, that give you the impression of privacy, and you really get privacy. It's much better privacy than not using them. But are you safe if you are targeted as an individual? That's another question. So I cannot answer that question perfectly, but it feels to me that everything that improves privacy, even incrementally, is something that we should pursue. And in that sense, I would even support a CBDC that uses eCash because I know that there are much more worse designs that could be implemented as well. But again, my prediction would be that we definitely get the bad one, and maybe we get the good one in a small scale as well if we're very lucky. But if not, it doesn't matter, because we're still building it on Bitcoin. And to build it on Bitcoin, you don't need the permission of these people, and we'll just have to fix it ourselves. And I believe we have the better coders, we have the better hackers, we have the better theoreticians, and we also have the better money. So I'm not worried too much about the future.
Amen to that. That's a perfect note to end on. I, first of all, really appreciate you sharing your scarce time, because Bitcoin is scarce like your time, but Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you very much for coming on this one. Thank you for answering my questions. I think this is going to be really useful for a lot of people. I'll include your Nostr and Twitter links and whatnot. But in terms of different eCash projects, npub.cash, eNUTS, Cashew, is it cashew.me to get to the wallet? Or Cashew.space.
Cashew.space to find the project's main website, and you find also the documentation space there for developers. If you'll allow me, I'll do a special shout out to developers listening to this. We're in dire need. We're an unfunded, open, free and open source project. We live off contributors like you, and if you're looking for any Bitcoin project and you want to get your hands dirty and finally work on something in this space, feel free and be invited warmly to join us in our mission at Cashew.space. You'll find information. You can just reach me using any channel that you like, and I'll hold your hand and show you the ecosystem and show where you can help, because we definitely need help. So if you're hearing this, please consider it.
All right. A great message to end on. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really, again, appreciate it. And this was fascinating. I'll just ask you to stay for a moment after I cut the recording, just to let it upload fully. But thank you again, Calle. This was fantastic. I learned a lot, and I could probably ask you questions for a few more hours, but we'll have to save that for next time. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Walker. I appreciate it. Thanks.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net or hit me up on social media. On Nostr, head to primal.net/Walker. And on Twitter, search for @WalkerAmerica or @TitcoinPodcast. You can also watch the video version of this show on X or on YouTube by going to youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica or Rumble by searching for @WalkerAmerica. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million. But Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.